Y'all, it is finally time to talk about every single upcoming storm shadow spell in the upcoming Darkmoor update. Unless y'all have been living under a rock, every day this week, different content creators have been teasing entire schools of upcoming shadow spell changes. They're changing every single shadow and shadow enhanced spell. Today's video that covered the storm teasers, they're linked in the description. Please show them some love. But we need to talk about how all of the upcoming shadow spell changes for storm are gonna affect the game. We have a lot to talk about today, y'all, including what is easily the new best hit in the game, starting right off with the new Shadow Shrike, the shadow form that they're tying to Storm. Now, this looks very, very different than Live Realm Shadow Shrike. Why? Because it gives damage instead of pierce. But let's talk about what the spell does, right? It costs a Shadow Pip, and in return for that Shadow Pip, you get a Storm School Pip back, and for 3 turns, you can hit with 45% more damage. Now, like every single shadow spell that we've talked about this entire week, they're doing a new backlash mechanic with every shadow spell called a pact. And what a pact is, you have to give up stuff while these things are out to not take backlash. You start with 15% lash. Every time that you do something the shadow creature likes, you reduce the lash 5%. And you have 3 rounds to take 0 lash from doing anything shadow related in the upcoming Darkmoor update. So this new spell, you get a Storm Pip and you get damage output for the Shad, but in order to not take 15% of your max health in lash, what this spell is saying is you have to consume blades, meaning you basically have to consume 1 blade a turn for 3 turns to take no lash from the new Shadow Shrike. Now, it's very weird. I feel like a shadow form that gives damage is actually better suited for schools that naturally have high pierce, so I would actually use this spell way more often on a fire or a mid. Those are very naturally high pure schools, and I don't know, those schools, you might see them actually put out blades to not take backlash from this. Other than the actual Storm Pip that you get, I would say this is way more usable on other schools that actually have the pierce that Storm doesn't really get as much of. Who knows, maybe we'll see Storm using pure shadow forms and pure schools using Storm Shadow Shrike, right? We could see that happening. But the other shadow form that they're tying to Storm, and it's also a new spell teaser for the upcoming update, is the new Dark Shrike. And this is very weird. In exchange for the Shad, it basically does like a Shadow Wanted and gives you 3 universal 20% blades. But you still start with the potential to take 15% of your max health and backlash. In order to not take lash with this spell, you need to consume damage overtimes on yourself. Now, Storm already has multiple very good damage overtime clears like Zilla, which clears 2 dots, and the new Jupiter's Might, which clears 3 dots. But the difference between these dot counters and this new teaser is that this removes 1 dot per turn for 3 turns. Not only do you have to have 3 dots out for the 3 turns that this is out to not take backlash with this, you're only gradually reducing the damage overtimes over those 3 rounds. So as a dot counter, I'm not really sure I like this considering how powerful dots can become. However, we see a meta right now in PvP where dots have basically taken over. This would be a meta thing to have on every school. I just don't think you would only use this. You would kind of combine this with dot counters that you have otherwise as well. And just like every single shadow spell teaser that we've seen this week, you can combine these new pure shadow spells with new base spells in order to create new shadow enhanced spells. What that basically means is every single current shadow enhanced spell is gonna have a new base spell made for it, and then you can combine it with a pure shadow spell to make new shadow enhanced spells that have backlash attached to them. So while yes, for a school like Storm that has a lot of good shadow enhanced spells as AoEs, you might end up taking more HP in terms of backlash. You'll end up doing more damage. That's the trade-off. So let's look at all these new base spells. Let's look at all the new shadow enhanced Storm spells. And I thought I would have to start off with the banger Rusalka. This is a new base Rusalka. Now the top path for 6 pips is a 745 damage hit, and it gives you a random blade. One of the blades is a 60 blade. Could be really, really good. Keep in mind, these are Storm blades, so you really want to use this on a Storm. And the bottom path, it gives you blades based on the school of the caster. So that's more like, you know, if a fire could use this and get fire blades from the bottom path. However, in order to get the blades, you have to give up weaknesses on opponent. That's what the spell is saying. Let's say that you do something like, I don't know, one of the new triple weaknesses. You could put that out and then use the new bottom path Rusalka. And for every weakness that you give up, you get a 55% blade for your school. So it's a Storm would get 55% Storm blades, a fire would get 55% fire blades. But what happens when you combine the new base Rusalka with one of the pure shadow spells we saw earlier? Craziness. This is a new teaser for shadow enhanced Rusalka Y'all, this is crazy. So the top hat does 2,000 damage base for 6 pips and a shad. This is, per pip, the new highest hitting spell in the entirety of the game. You also still have that random blade mechanic added onto it for the one that's allowed in PvE. As far as the PvP one, you don't have to give up weaknesses for the blades, and you still get 60% blades. Still a very good 1,200 damage hit. This is way, way better than I thought it would be, given all the other teasers that we've seen. No matter whether you use this in PvE or PvP, this is a massive amount of damage for a shad and 6 pip. Now, obviously, now that we're talking about shadow magic, there is backlash associated with it. What is the pact with the new Rusalka, you might be wondering? In order to not take backlash from using the spell, you need weaknesses on your enemy. Now, Storm is partly a weakness school. They have hits that do double infections. You could also cross-train balance weaknesses that do triple weaknesses, essentially. I think these are going to be mad meta in PvE and PvP, y'all. You should put one out there, and every round, after you cast Rusalka, whether you cast a top or bottom path, you can remove one of the weaknesses that you put on and take 5% less slash, all the way down to 0 potentially. When you get damage like this, I don't see why you wouldn't put weaknesses. I feel like it's worth the round. Like, the amount of damage that you get extra is worth way more than a buff, right? Like a buff on a regular Rusalka. So I think it's a no-brainer. I'm gonna be spamming the hell out of Rusalka in PvE. This is ridiculous. These are enchantable. They made fusions enchantable. So yes, you would have to get base Rusalka. You'd have to combine it with a shadow spell, and then you would also have to combine that with an enchant to get the best bang for your buck. But we're looking at a 2,300 damage hit in PvE and a very powerful 1,200 damage hit and blade in PvP. All for doing that combo, all for doing that fusion. Now, moving on to Sound of Musicology, because this is the AoE that they didn't tease way before all of these teasers happened. The top hat, it is a new AoE hit and blade, pretty decent. I would do this into another AoE, I think. Otherwise, it's kind of not worth it over like Bunyips or Tempest. And the bottom path is very weird. It gives up blades to give you storm blades. So I guess the intention is you're giving up all school blades or very weak blades to get those 50% storm blades. But for every blade you give up, you get a 50 blade, and you also get a 580 damage hit. Not really great. I'm never a huge fan of blades for blades or traps for traps, even if the ones that you make are better than the ones that you had initially. But the Shadow Enhanced version, again, explosive damage. You're looking at top hat, is, I want to say, the new best AoE in-game as well. This is only 5 pips in a shad, meaning if you actually have a shad early, this is just a very early hit that you just throw out for 1,300 damage. And you also get a 45 blade added onto it. Now, keep in mind, the pact on this is that you have to give up blades, whether you use top path or bottom path. In order to not take lash from this, it will help you to have blades that you can remove every round after you cast it. And even though the bottom path, they seem to be lowering damage and increasing utility to make it balanced in PvP, still ridiculous. 5 pips in a shad for 1,000 damage and 365% blade. I think in PvP, actually elemental blading before doing something, you've never been more incentivized to blade on the blade school. Now, there's a reason why people don't tend to blade. It's very hard to give up blades, I would argue, even now on a storm without getting punished for it, because blade counters are very punishing as well. So these extra ice and fire blades that you put on when you Ellie blade, they're kind of a liability in PvP. But now, if you get the timing right, you're hella rewarded for blading. You literally use it to not take backlash from doing extremely powerful spells. It's obviously much easier to blade and not get countered in PvE, so definitely I'd recommend using this as an AoE in PvE. But in PvP as well, there's some kind of, like, you know, play and counterplay with blades on Storm that I think we haven't seen a lot of. Now, we're gonna rapid fire the next teaser because we've already seen this, but the new base glow bugs, it's just a base AoE or a dot removing spell. It can remove 2 dots, and for each dot that it removes, the opponent gets a weakness placed on them. And the Shadow Enhanced version, if you combine the base glow bug with the shadow spell, it's just a better AoE or a hit and triple weakness. And basically, to not take lash from this, you have to remove dots on yourself, so it's more of a reactive dot counter. I don't really like dot countering for backlash at all, because you can't control whether your opponent dots you in PvE, and your opponent could detonate dots before you even get a chance to remove them after casting Glowbug in PvP. Right, the only way a dot removal that happens once per turn for 3 turns is good is if that damage is low, and if your opponent doesn't react to the spell and remove your ability to remove the dots to reduce lash, if that makes makes sense. So kind of underwhelming. I personally love Sound of Musicology. I think it's a new best go-to AoE with shads compared to Glowbug, which is sad. End of an era. Now let's talk about the healing shad. Dark and Stormy, the new base Dark and Stormy is obviously no shadow pip needed. It does a lot of damage. It does almost about how much a Triton does, but it has a heal added onto it, right? I think Triton does about 900, so you're missing out on like 200 damage, but you're getting 450 healing all over a quick 3 rounds. So there's very little liability if you're scared about a heal counter. And the bottom pat that hits and then gives up weaknesses for healing. Now, I want to say based on how much the healing is on the spell, there's a possibility that every weakness you give up gives you a new heal, which could make bottom pat a hit and triple heal if you have 3 weaknesses to give up on your opponent, meaning there could be a lot more room for these triple weaknesses and even spells like Queen Calypso in Storm PvP or in Storm PvE. Now, what do you get when you combine the new base Dark and Stormy with a shadow spell? Shadow enhanced Dark and Stormy, and this is crazy to look at. The top hat is with an enchant, essentially anyways, a 1900 damage hit that also heals you for 1300 over 5 rounds. And the bottom pat is even more healing over 5 rounds with 2 heal over time, but it's still 1300 damage, a ton of damage, an even more big amount of healing. And once again, to reduce lash with this, you need weaknesses on opponent. That's what the pact on this is. For the 3 rounds after you cast this, every round you want to remove a weakness on your opponent. It really helps to have weaknesses on your opponent or to cast this right out of Dark and Stormy, so you don't take that much lash, and even if you take a little bit, the healing should more than make up for it, right? And then finally, we have new base Iron Sultan. The top hat as a selective targeting spell, slightly worse than most AoEs that you could ever do it for pips, in my opinion, but could have some very, very fringe uses. But the bottom path, I really like it. So this is a heal gambit, meaning you have to have a heal on yourself for this to do extra stuff outside of that 385 upfront damage. And you also have to give up the heal and not get healing, right? So if it's a super powerful heal like Dark and Stormy, you would not want to use bottom path Iron Salt. But let's say you have a weak heal. I don't know, something that you are willing to give up, right? Maybe something that involves life duel school, maybe even. For giving up that heal, you do 2 minus 45 weaknesses on your opponent. You're basically turning one form of mitigation into another. Not too bad in terms of versatility. And when you combine Iron Sultan with a shadow spell, you get new Iron Sultan Shadow Enhanced, the top hat, a gigantic 1500 damage selective targeting spell that also weaknesses. We've never seen selective targeting get this powerful before. So this 1500 damage, right? It does 1500 against 1 target, but it does a little less against 2, does a little less against 3. But I want to say if you enchant this against 2 targets anyways, it's very comparable to a regular AoE. And you also get 245 weaknesses, presumably on all the targets that you put out. Maybe as you increase the targets, the number of weaknesses on targets goes down. And the bottom path is also really good, like nearly 900 damage. And you get 45% universal weaknesses. One of the best hit and weakness spells that we've ever seen. There is a big catch with this one though. In order to not take lash with the new Shadow Enhanced Iron Sultan, you have to have heals on yourself. And in the case of Iron Sultan, you need 3 heals to be removed over 3 rounds to take 0 backlash. Compared to having blades on self, or even dots on self, or even weaknesses on opponent, this one I would argue is very hard to easily do. Giving up heals to not take lash is crazy, because the heals might actually make up for your lash anyway. Right, it's like a double bad thing. You're removing healing and also maybe even still taking lash, right? It's kind of a weird thing to have out. But I don't know, if you're running a very heavy healing strat, I could see bottom path Iron Sultan being useful. I don't know if top path is comparable to Bugs or Sound of Musicology, but it is yet another very high damage hit in PvE that might actually have uses because it's enchantable. And with that, we wrap up every single shadow spell teaser that we've gotten this week, y'all. I hope y'all have enjoyed the coverage. Hopefully I explained what all these spells do. But let me know if I missed anything. Maybe I'm clueless and these aren't as powerful as I think. I literally think this is a crazy power upgrade. I look forward to reading y'all's thoughts on this. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub review. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon. And yeah.